Welcome to Talkin' Waukesha, the podcast where every conversation springs to life.
I'm Andrew Nofke.
And I'm Anthony Terrell.
And we're your hosts for today's journey into the heart of Waukesha.
Whether you're a local or just passing through, join us as we explore the stories, people, and hidden gems that make Waukesha truly special.
From community events to personal anecdotes, we're here to bring you the pulse of our vibrant town.
So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and let's dive into another episode of Talkin' Waukesha,
where every conversation springs to life. Good morning. Well, I guess it's not necessarily morning, depends on when people are listening to it. But today on Talkin' Waukesha, we're joined by Jennifer Andrews, who's the Director of Community Development here at the city.
Hello.
So Jennifer, you've started off your career here, it seems, and have been kind of just slowly working your way up in the corporate ladder, the city corporate ladder, yeah, from planner to the director. So how are you enjoying your time working with the city?
Oh, I've loved working for the city. That's why I've been here for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's plenty to be challenged by. So I've always been challenged, and the people are great to work with, and the mission is close to my heart, and so I've really enjoyed it.
Good. So we're going to ask really fun questions, being right up in front and center with community development. There's a lot of questions that residents want to ask. So, of course, I'm going to ask, those fun questions that kind of can be irksome for it to hear as a community development leader. But the first one is, why does it seem that so many new developments in Waukesha are car washes, apartment complexes, and quick trips?
Yes, I actually do get that question frequently. Like, why are there so many car washes? Or recently somebody said, you tore down my favorite restaurant and built a car wash.
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to explain is the city didn't tear it down. Each property has a zoning classification, what it can be used for, residential, commercial, office, those types of things. And there's a list of permitted uses. And so if you are a property owner and you want to sell your restaurant to a car wash operation, and it's permitted in that zoning category, which your property is zoned at, you can do that. So there's private property rights. And so we do not get involved in property sales and who buys what and who owns which property. And there's just guidelines as to how properties can be used more generally. So in a commercial district, you might get a car wash, you could get a restaurant. Mm-hmm. We don't get to choose the end users. That's really determined by the market, the free market, and
right.
What's in demand at the moment.
So when it comes to a property that's being sold by a bank, being sold by whatever, it's really up to the consumer of I think Waukesha needs a car wash, or I think they need a quick trip, or I think they need a yoga studio, and it's up to them, provided that it falls within the right zoning
right
policies.
Yeah, if it's say those were all commercial uses, so mm-hmm. Properties zoned commercial, each one of those users are going to have a market study and know that there's an open area in the market in that location mm-hmm. for one of those uses, and go from there.
And would that also kind of explain, too, why downtown doesn't have a grocery store, which I've seen people kind of complain about, right? It's like, yeah, we as the city would love it, but if no one wants to build it there, then that's what it is. We can't force people to build a grocery store.
Right, and that's a great example, because we would really love, for my whole career here, we would really love to have had a grocery store move in, but they have very specific requirements about people living within a certain district, mm-hmm. distance from the store, and parking requirements, and all of those things, and as well as space requirements, and we just haven't been able to make that match.
I think, a lot of the developments on the horizon seem to bolster and help that kind of endeavor of, making sure that the downtown residents can, basically not need a vehicle. You can, potentially walk to your place of work. If you're working downtown, you can buy groceries, buy whatever downtown without needing a vehicle. And I think that'd be a cool thing to see for downtown.
Yeah, I think as we see more and more residential units being built downtown, that makes it more likely that we might mm-hmm. achieve a grocery store or a small market or something like that. Yeah. But definitely our goal is to try to attract businesses that are missing. So we're mm-hmm. out there actively trying to attract certain businesses to certain areas of the city. But at the end of the day, it's their decision. And
then what kind of things does the city do to try and help attract these businesses? Is it just explaining, here's our demographic, here's our populace for these different locations, here's why we think you'll fit? Or is there more of an active campaigning for these businesses to come in?
So we're often talking to realtors who have spaces for lease or for sale, And we're trying to play matchmaker, basically. If we think it's a good location for, in this case, say a grocery store, then we're going to reach out to grocery store operators and try to play matchmaker there. And then also sell them on the city and why that's so great and why they should be located in whichever location we're talking about.
Nice.
Okay. Hopefully that's an easy sell then.
I think it's an easy sell, but if you can meet their criteria. But I mean, the city itself kind of sells itself. It's a great place.
I mean, all of us went to Carroll, so we all know that, having at least lived here for a couple of years.
I didn't realize we were all alums.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
This has now become the Carroll Alum Podcast.
Yeah, I think this is the first one we're all Carroll alums, so yeah, go Pios.
Yep, there we go. So what sort of grants and loan programs does the city offer for businesses and homeowners in Waukesha?
So this changes from time to time, but right now we have two main programs. One for businesses in what we call the central city, so downtown and kind of the surrounding areas. And that's to help people, property owners, upgrade their commercial spaces. So sometimes they need fire protection or they need to do some upgrades just to meet some code requirements or just to make it a more desirable space. So we want to make sure that those spaces are leased up. And we've got a pretty good occupancy rate right now downtown. But we've got a loan program designed for that. And then we also have a homeowner rehab program. So if you have a home and you need a roof and you meet the qualifications of the program, we can provide loans to you as well. So there's certain qualifications based on income and where the house is and what the house value is, but we're trying to preserve that affordable housing stock in a really great livable condition, and so that's what that program is aimed at.
And these are our loan. So the grants are you don't have to pay them back, but the loans are you do eventually have to pay them back, and it's probably better rates than you'd get from a bank because it's from the city.
Yeah, so both of those programs I just described happen to be loan programs, but they're low interest loan programs. We also have a very small grant program for if you own a landmark in the city, a landmark building or a home, you can, and you're doing some painting or repair, you can get some grant money for that as well through our Landmarks Commission.
And with the Landmarks Commission, I think I've seen that. I mean, it can be challenging because you have to kind of keep the historic value of the home when you're making these upgrades and keep it looking as close as possible. But with Waukesha having so many historic buildings, is it relatively easy to kind of, apply for this and, as long as you're just following the guidelines? Is that really the trickier part, really?
Yeah, really, the Landmarks Commission has some set guidelines. So as long as you're willing to follow those guidelines, I think they're very generous in providing the grant support. And then another grant program that I should have mentioned is also in kind of the downtown central city. We have a facade and awning upgrade grant program, so you can apply for that too. Those, both the landmarks and the facade program, those grant programs are funded with federal funds. So there's, some requirements that have to be met.
And for the facade and awning, is that if you need a new business sign, or is it anything, or is it literally just physical awnings or the physical exterior of the building?
Yeah, it's signage or awnings and also facade. So even if you're just painting your facade or if you have to replace some rotten wood or whatever it is, we're there to help. It's a matching grant.
Very nice. So kind of going back to talking about the projects that are helping build up downtown, what sort of projects are coming up for Waukesha that you're finding that you're the most excited about?
We are working on some new housing projects, and other people may not get as excited as we do, but the more population we can have downtown, the more vibrant our commercial districts are going to be. And so we have some housing projects that we're working on, and then also the city is in need of housing units. So people want to live here. We don't have enough places for people to live. It's driving the cost up. So the more we can add to that market, the better. So we need the housing units, and it'll really help keep downtown vibrant.
What's driving the need for the additional housing? I think at one point you had done a presentation for the employees and mentioned that it's like an average of 1 or 2 people per residential unit at this point. Is that really one of the big driving factors, or? Yeah,
I've actually graphed the occupancy rate in housing units, and it's just on this steady decline. The occupancy for owner-occupied units is 2.1, and the occupancy for rentals is just below 2. That's just showing that maybe empty nesters are staying in their homes longer, and also if you're, an older person, you've lost your spouse, that you might keep living in that house, and so the occupancy rate just keeps declining. People tend to be less favorable about having roommates, so they're living alone more. So there's all kinds of reasons for that, and it's not just Waukesha, it's a nationwide trend, this
Right.
size of housing, or the number of occupants in a housing unit.
Out of working with the city, like at first I'm like, I have no clue what community development is. I mean, so, but having worked with you guys a lot more, I understand it a lot better. And even to the point of, I now follow on Instagram, there's like a community development sub channel, and one of them, my brother-in-law said, he's like, why it's important to build multifamily homes and apartments instead of just building, single family homes or condo complexes, basically. It's like, yeah, why it's important to build these. And I'm like, this makes sense. And I'm like, we need to figure out how to let the community know this. But so I guess is that I think that's one of the things we also see too outside of the apartments is a lot of multifamily homes. And I guess what's the benefit for the community of multifamily homes versus single family homes?
Well, everybody has a different housing stage of life, right? And so you might start off as a college student that needs an apartment. You might end up a divorced parent that needs an apartment with a couple bedrooms for your kids to come and visit. And so multifamily just offers a lot of flexibility for people through the different life cycles of housing through your life. And, when you're an empty nester, maybe you want to travel and you don't want to have the maintenance of a single family home, so you rent. Or you spend part of your time here and part of your time somewhere else. So it provides flexibility. So that is really the most important piece of it, is it's just a well-rounded housing opportunities.
Right.
But the other piece is the more we can increase how much taxes or what percentage of the overall tax base is commercial properties, that's less that single-family homeowners have to pay in taxes.
Right.
So if commercial properties are paying 30% of the total levy, that's, that lessens what single-family homeowners are required to pay. So at the end of the day, it helps single-family homeowners pay less taxes.
I mean, it makes sense if you're building a single structure and you have 100 people that are now shared owners of that tax base. It's now a different avenue that money has to. It's not going to raise taxes for anyone else. It's not going to lower taxes necessarily, but it's just spreading the joy.
Distributes it.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, the City Council adopted the city's comprehensive plan. Can you explain what that plan entails and how the city uses that plan when it comes to city planning and development?
Okay, so as urban planners, we have two main guiding documents. As we referenced before, we put zoning on properties. So these two documents really drive how the community is going to develop. And the first one is the comprehensive plan. That's kind of your 30,000-foot view of the community, your long-term goals. These plans are usually for 20 years. And it's your long-term goals looking forward. And there's actually 9 elements to a plan like that, but they include things like housing, transportation, natural resources, community facilities, those type of things. So it's not just land use, which is a component of it, but it's looking at the community as a whole. So it engages other departments besides community development, and it's really saying from a development standpoint, what do we want the community to look like in 20 years from now? So that's the comprehensive plan. So that kind of sets the overall policy guidelines. And then the coupling of the zoning with that plan is really what implements those changes in the community. So the comprehensive plan is that overall view, and then the zoning is the implementation tool to get there.
So with the city kind of being not landlocked, that's not quite the right word, but almost fully developed at this point where there's very few zonable spaces that are available, how do we take that comprehensive plan and the zoning code and kind of combine them together to encourage growth where we're not growing beyond our means?
So it's a different approach. And so our approach to this comprehensive plan has been much different than it has been in the past. And our approach at this time is to we're really looking for those redevelopment opportunities. And what makes a redevelopment opportunity is maybe a property that's underdeveloped or underutilized or vacant. So we're looking at the whole city thinking, how could this look different in the future? And then also we're looking at neighborhoods that maybe maybe grew up in the 80s and 90s, were built out in the 80s and 90s, but they have no commercial services around them. So how can we try to introduce some commercial services, some convenience services for those neighborhoods, and so they don't have to drive as far for those services.
Right.
So we're looking at those. Those are really the two things when we're thinking about land use is what can we change? You know, what isn't contributing anymore to the success of the city, and how can we make that better? And then how do we supplement what we have that is working well but maybe needs a little tweaking?
Yes, it's possible in theory to have a primarily residential area, and take maybe a derelict or abandoned home and turn it into a commercial space that's not going to impede on adding extra noise, traffic, things like that, just to make it more convenient for the residences around.
Right. We call that neighborhood business, and it's usually on we call them community nodes or neighborhood nodes. You know, those busier intersections that are maybe adjacent to neighborhoods or things like that.
And is there like a trick to balancing that with keeping it, I guess, keeping the historical nature to some of those things too? Or is that like a big hurdle that you guys have to try and figure out, is like, how do we not modernize it too much?
Yeah, it's always a balance to try to make sure that new development fits in with the existing fabric of the neighborhood, and it's a challenge, and whether it's design or just scale, all of those things. Yeah, it's a challenge, and also people are really adverse to change. You know, they've moved a place or they live a place because they love it. So
Right.
they're not really necessarily looking for change, but often after these changes happen, people are very happy, like, oh, that worked out really well.
And I think the new, is it Cobblestone Hotel?
Yes.
Is that the new? I think that's a great example of just watching the process of making sure that it fits within the downtown atmosphere of, you know, taking the old U.S. Bank,
Associated.
so close, taking the old Associated Bank and refurbishing it into a hotel where people are like, oh, we don't need a hotel downtown. It's like, we do though. I mean, there's so many event spaces and there's need for it, but also let's take a look at the structural design. Let's make sure it's not too big, that it's not going to cause extra traffic, congestion, things like that, and then it's going to physically look like it belongs and it hasn't just been, you know, plopped there from outer space, and it's something odd and different that doesn't kind of fill the motif of downtown.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody's going to have their own opinion about that too, right? So also, where are you going to park all those people? So that's another piece of that too. Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah. But yeah, if you wanted to learn more about those, I think there's been a lot of discussion out of a couple council meetings. You know, those are available on the website.
So one of the big upcoming projects for community development in the city is the zoning code update. What is the purpose of the update, and kind of what are the goals for the new zoning code?
So we just talked about the comprehensive plan, and one of the things that we did with the comprehensive plan is really look at our land uses, which we've been talking about. And so what governs how things get built is the zoning code. You know, whether that's a setback for a fence or how much parking you need or how high a building can be, those are all things that are handled in the zoning code, and what uses can happen on each parcel. So it's the implementation tool, and we really feel like we need to modernize our zoning code to represent where we are as a community in terms of development, which is redevelopment, and trying to make sure that projects are compatible and maybe they have the same setbacks as the neighborhood. A lot of our properties over the years became what we call non-conforming, so they were built the turn of the century or in the 30s, and the planning theory over time changed, and the setbacks in the code got bigger and bigger, which made those, say, houses that were built in those older neighborhoods what we call non-conforming, meaning you couldn't rebuild them on the same lot in the same form. And we want to change all that, make those conforming, you know, neighborhoods, and allow people to rebuild in the fashion that makes sense in those neighborhoods. So the new zoning code will be a mix of kind of correcting those type of things, and then also looking at how we get the greatest redevelopment opportunities as we can on the properties that we have available.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things we see in the redevelopment commission is that people who have older homes where it's like, yeah, it doesn't conform anymore, so I have to come for an alteration to the code just to make my existing home meet the current code without changing anything, because it was code compliant then but not now.
Yeah, it's frustrating for homeowners and property owners for sure.
What is one thing you think the average Waukesha resident doesn't know about that you think that they should know about in regard to community development?
Well, I think two things. One, there's really two sides. We have building inspection, which is really focused on safety, and I think one thing people don't know about building inspection is we're there to enforce a code, and the code is the minimum. So we're not there to judge somebody's workmanship. We're just there to make sure that it meets the minimum code requirement for safety and things like that. The other piece being planning, and we're really here to create community, and that always includes change. So, but we're always very focused on the things that we've already talked about, trying to make sure that change is meaningful and fits in with the neighborhood as best as possible.
Yeah.
But I think the other part of that is people don't understand that we don't control who owns a property or what they do with their property necessarily. So if they conform to the zoning code and how they're using it, we can't usually force them to make changes, and we don't get to choose if it's owner occupied or rental. Those are all property owner decisions.
As long as they're not being a nuisance in any way, from a legal standpoint, there's not much we can control.
Yeah, and we've seen, like, over the time, ownership is a good example. That changes over time. It's all driven by the market. So you might have a single family home that was owned, and then when it went back on the market, somebody picked it up as a rental unit. Those things, we don't control that.
Right.
That's all market driven.
All right, that's about halfway through the serious questions. So I want to go towards the fun questions now.
Okay.
Let's break it up a bit. Let's get it.
But this was so fun. That was the fun. I thought those were the fun questions.
Were you glazing over?
All right, so I want to know, what is the most adventurous thing that you have ever done?
Oh.
And would you do it again?
It's all relative, right? So for me, I'm a little afraid of heights. So for me, it felt like we were in Utah at Olympic Park, and I did the zip lining down a mountain. It was terrifying. And I did not want to do it, but I kind of got peer pressured into it. And so
sometimes that's how the best adventures happen, though.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would do it again. I mean, it was invigorating and it was great, but it was a little much for me.
How high up was the zip line compared to where you ended then?
I don't know. It seemed very high.
Too high. All right.
It started at where the ski jump is and went all the way down to, I don't know, the bottom of the mountain.
Okay. It sounds neat, but also, if you're not a fan of heights, that doesn't sound enjoyable.
I had never ziplined before or anything, so it was kind of scary.
Okay. If you could instantly become an expert in any one skill or hobby, what would it be and why?
I've often wished I was more artistic.
What type of art?
I wish I could draw, really.
Okay.
Draw or paint. I do not have that gift at all. So, that is one thing that I've always wished I had more of. Sure. I have friends that are artists. My husband's very creative, and I'm always jealous.
You just got to start with doodling. Just, start drawing little things, and it gets better. I mean, I took one class in college that was like, oh, yeah, it's art. I'm like, I'm never going to use this. And while it's somewhat accurate, I still, I can sketch a lot better because I had to do the same thing, still sketching. So just all right, look at something and sketch that out. And I've gotten a little better. I'm not the best at sketching, but, take some time.
Yeah, I can very much recreate something that's already been drawn. I can't come up with anything off the top of my head.
I'm great with tracing.
Yeah, right, tracing.
Right. Coloring within the lines, pretty good.
Yeah.
Paint by number.
Yeah, that's tricky. That's numbers and tracing within the lines.
So what is the most unusual or interesting job that you've ever had?
I guess my answer would probably be tree climbing. We own a small business, which is recreational tree climbing, and most people are confused and surprised because they've never heard of that before. So,
it's true. I mean, I think I've seen you guys out and about once or twice, and it's just why are you throwing ropes up in a tree? It's oh, this is literally just so people can safely learn how to climb trees in a contained environment, and it makes a lot of sense because if there's rock climbing, why not tree climbing? Because there's a lot more trees to climb around here than there are cliff faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot more relaxing than rock climbing because you're not worried about falling because you're tied in, and so you can just hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the advanced class, I imagine, is tree climbing and then setting up a hammock so you can be, enjoying the tree.
Yes, sometimes my husband will set up a hammock and people can climb in there. Yep. Yeah.
I was kidding, but I love that. That's a real thing.
We've had people take musical instruments up in the tree, their journals, all
That's
kinds
fantastic.
of things. Yeah.
I love that. What's something about yourself that most people might not know?
Let's see.
that you want to share as well.
Now this has turned into an interview. Like a work interview, job interview.
Well, I do have a teaching degree, so that was a surprise that I was speaking to the leadership group lately, and that came out as part of my background, and most people don't know that about me. So,
what did you want to teach?
History.
History?
Yeah, history is my love. I love history, and so I have a degree actually to teach middle and high school history.
Very nice.
Do you have a favorite era that you go towards more, or I don't know how to define history, but
a subsection of history.
Not really. I think I focus most on American and European history. That's probably what I know the most about.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sounds like American education system for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm like, it's pretty much what I know the most about too.
Kind of self-centric.
A little bit.
So I guess what other job than your current job would you like to try? I mean, was that go right into the teaching too, or would you want to do something else?
I don't think so. I've been thinking about that because I've had some friends that have retired, and I'm like, what would I want to do if I wasn't working here and I was retired? And gosh, I'm not really sure. I don't have a good answer for that. I love my job. I love what I do. It's part of me. So I grew up in a family that my dad was a general contractor, so we've always been around the trades, and so I don't know what else I would do. I pretty much love this job.
Board of Zoning Appeals, and
Yeah.
would you, after retiring, would you want to come back and work on the boards maybe, or is that
Yeah, I would volunteer for sure. I'd volunteer all over the place. As working for money, that's a little different.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
What book, movie, or TV show are you currently enjoying?
I am reading a book by S.J. Paris, which is a historical mystery novel. So I read mostly historical mysteries, fictional.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what's it kind of set around?
The story centers around how Mary Stuart, or Mary Queen of Scots, was trying to reclaim the throne from Queen Elizabeth.
Interesting.
And the plots between the two to
is it
basically
kind of
eliminate the two.
Post-War of the Roses kind of then?
Yeah. Right.
Interesting. It's a very neat concept.
Yeah.
So do you like those old historic British TV shows like Bridgerton or stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I watch all of those.
Okay. That's what it reminded me of. My girlfriend just caught up and finished watching Bridgerton, so
yeah, it's kind of fun.
The concept of it is fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
So would you say, historically wise, do you like that kind of Victorian England kind of setting as well, along with the basic U.S. history? Is that kind of your bread and butter when it comes to European history, or is it kind of all history?
I would say medieval European history all the way through maybe World War II.
Okay. How do you unwind after a long day of work?
I like to read, and we have a very nice garden in the back of our house. So especially in the warmer months, I like to spend some time back there, whether it's gardening or sitting or reading. And I also walk a lot, so that helps me clear my mind. So
is it flowers or vegetables or both, or
mostly flowers, some vegetables. Hopefully this year, we'll see.
What are you trying to grow?
Well, we always have a salsa garden,
All right.
so
Ooh,
we
nice.
got that. This year we added some peas and beans and onions and things
Very
like
nice.
that. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I've been trying to garden now that I have a new house. I learned there's asparagus in the back. Didn't
Yes.
know until
You've got a crown of asparagus.
I didn't know until it was about up to my shoulders.
Yeah, they get
And I
really
was
tall.
Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, that's what this was. This was asparagus.
Well,
I have a ton of rhurbarb in my yard too.
Okay.
So that comes back every year.
That's one of the ones that just kind of invades slowly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with the asparagus, just cut it down, and then that'll start growing back to normal heights
Yeah,
again.
there we go. Now I know though. So if you could go back in time, would you go back? Or sorry, if you could travel through time, would you go to the past or would you go to the future?
I think I would go to the future because, although I love history, working in this job, we're always planning for the future. And sometimes the projects that we work on take a really long time to come to fruition. So I'm always very anxious to see how it's going to turn out. So I think I'd want to go to the future. And
That makes sense.
How far into the future would you want to go?
oh, not too far, maybe 25 years.
Okay.
That's a good amount. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that with Tony and the city administrator, and he had asked that same question of how far, and I'm like, well, you don't want to go too far because you don't know if the planet's going to be around, but at the same time, you want to go
That's
far enough.
pessimistic.
Yeah, I know. But with the sun could implode, anything like that. But yeah, let's go far enough where I could see change and
Yes.
maybe have an impact on it if I could go back again.
Yeah, there are properties that we were working on when I first started here, trying to attract development, that are just getting developed now. So it's like sometimes it just takes a long time.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so back to some other more business questions, maybe to call it. I don't
It's
know.
not that heavy.
Yeah, no, they're not that crazy.
They're
So
only labeled as general questions.
yeah, they are general questions. So I guess, what is your favorite part of working for the city?
I think seeing the changes in plans that we make come to fruition, and then, but mostly it's seeing how the community reacts to those developments and those changes, because it's always, as I mentioned, fraught with anxiety as we're going through the planning part. But then seeing how people really enjoy the changes
Yeah.
and really kind of adopt them and make it integrated into the community, I think it's very satisfying that
Right.
way. And seeing the improvements that, come as a result of that.
And I think a lot of the kind of negative feelings people get from like development in general is just the fear of the unknown. It's like, how is this going to impact things? And people don't want it near them necessarily. People don't want to see it. But then when it gets there, it's like, oh, this is actually pretty useful or kind of nice that that's there. And
Yes.
they kind of it's overreacting in a way, but understandably, everyone would overreact if it was happening near them at the same
Yeah,
time.
there's a lot of fear, and that's totally understandable.
Yeah. So how do you, I guess, respond to that kind of negative feedback that you might see from the community? And is it just kind of trust the process, or?
Well, a little bit of trust the process, but we also try to really understand what's driving their fear or their concern. And then is there something we can change about the project to address some of that? I mean, if they're opposed to it 100%, no matter what we change, they're not going to like it
Right.
before it gets built. But if we can make some changes to address, if they're concerned about headlights in the parking lot shining on their property, okay, we can do something about that.
Right.
And so really try to get to the core of what the real concerns are and driving that, and see what we can do to make changes to make it better for them. And then just like you said, trust the process, and we trust our experience and our education. And
Yeah. So when there's kind of those valid concerns, like, lights being too bright in the evening, headlights going into their property, how do you balance out making sure that concern is addressed, but not putting too much burden on the developer or the contractor that's trying to make these improvements on the property?
I think that's a really important mindset to have, and my planners have that, trying to understand both sides and figure out where we can compromise and what makes sense. And as they say with compromise, neither party's totally happy, but that's okay. We get to the best middle point. But I'd say most of this job is trying to find that right compromise so we can get to yes on a project, and then also understanding what the true limits are for the developer. What truly is their limit, how far they can truly go to make the changes you want, and not kill the project.
Right.
And then, how severe the concern really is with the neighbor.
And I can imagine sometimes too, it's a little tricky or even frustrating when the comments you're getting back, I feel like people, if they have an issue, they're going to say something, but if nobody has an issue, they're not going to say anything. So now you're only seeing these negative ones too, or it might only be one or two people saying something, and they're very strict on it or harsh about it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I mean, the people that are expending the effort to come to the meetings and make comments or write letters are motivated by, their disagreement with the project.
Yeah.
Right.
And certainly other people might read about it and go, oh, that looks good. That looks cool. I'm glad that's coming.
Yeah.
But they're not going to go through all that effort of finding a babysitter and coming to a meeting, to express that they're really excited about a project.
Yeah.
It's just human nature.
Yeah.
Right. I guess if someone had these kind of concerns, what's the best way to voice it? Is it showing up to the meetings, or are there other non-physical ways that they can voice these concerns?
Well, we're always happy to hear from people. They can email the planning staff or call the planning staff. We're always happy to hear from people as soon as possible, because then maybe we can make those changes
Right.
Before it gets too far down the process. So as soon as they see something or they have a question or concern, we're always open to talking to people and trying to understand that.
Great. Can you share a memorable moment or experience from your time working with the city that has had a significant impact on you?
I think on the significant impact, I would say, as I reflect back, it's all of those moments where this community's been in crisis. So whether it's the parade tragedy, a flood, some kind of storm damage, whatever that might be, the pandemic. What's really impressed me is how the city government has a plan, and it just snaps to and implements the plan and starts to address those issues. And as a resident, it's always comforting to go, wow, this is great. It's like a well-oiled machine.
Right.
Everybody's doing what they need to take care of the situation. And it's very organized, and we're ready. And that's happened with all of the different incidences that I've been part of, here to witness. And so I think sometimes as a citizen, you're just living your life, and you don't know all of that planning and work that goes on behind the scenes at your local government level. And so I'd say you can trust that we're ready. Hopefully don't want to be activated, but we're ready. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things, I may have even said it before in an earlier podcast, is that the weirdest part of government is that if you don't see the government actually working, that means it's working well. Like if you don't have to complain about something, your services are being provided, things are done, things are being taken care of, then that's good government.
Right.
Which is almost like the opposite of almost any other business, where it's like, yeah, you want to be extra visible, and if you're being visible, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, and people forget all the services that are tied to what their local government is providing.
Exactly.
So what is the most interesting or surprising fact about the city that you have learned about?
And asking someone who's interested in history, this could be
It
interesting.
could be modern or from history.
I could easily go to history, like the Mary Todd Lincoln history and all the Springs history and the water wars and all those things. So that's all interesting, but you can read about that online. I would go to, I visit a lot of local industry, and we talk to the industry leaders. And so we tour a lot of manufacturing plants, and I'm always amazed at, first of all, what's made in Waukesha, and then how far that reaches. So we've got products that are being sent to NASA that are going to end up in space, big mining equipment, things that are equipment that's ending up all over the world, or technology. And it's just fascinating the depth of the industry that we have in this community, because it's kind of silent and it's there, and you might drive past it, but you never really understand what's happening in those buildings. And so that's been the most interesting thing, is just how far-reaching what we make here in Waukesha is.
Yeah, we've been doing a series called Made in Waukesha, and just seeing some of the industries. I mean, we went to Ventura Foods, which wouldn't have known it was kind of here, but just over the weekend, I opened up a container of sour cream and onion dip, and it says packaged by Ventura Foods. I'm like, who knew that?
Yes.
It's not their main building necessarily, but it's still like part of they chose let's have Waukesha, Wisconsin be the home of packaging, anything from small dipping cups for Culver's and other kind of restaurants. I think it was Culver's. I don't know. Yeah. They didn't like telling us necessarily which ones are which.
I was the one who recorded it and went there, so I got to see the businesses they were doing. I don't know if I can say it. I don't know. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I mean, some of the dipping cups, they're the exact shape and size of everything, but
they were definitely restaurants that are down Sunset in Waukesha that you pass by.
Yeah, I only have secondhand information. That's why I can say words like this.
I think the other thing people don't realize is we've got a really strong energy sector here, and then a really strong food and beverage. Those are our two leading sectors here, and I wouldn't have guessed that.
But yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 of the energy sector companies that'll be part of that too, and it's I think even they were supporting last year. There was a hurricane that hit Louisiana. I think it was Waukesha. Was it Prolec GE or Waukesha Engines? They were sending transformers down there just to get their power back up, and it's you don't realize how far-reaching products from Waukesha end up. I mean, like you said, going anywhere from space to around the world.
Right.
Who has been your biggest mentor or influence in your career?
My biggest mentor, I would have to say, was the community development director before me, Steve Crandall. He really taught me the importance of relationship building and how to get to yes in projects, like we were talking about with compromise. And he was a great mentor, and he really allowed me to explore different parts of the field and challenge myself, and he challenged me. And so I think, and I still talk to him, so I'd say he was my biggest mentor.
Very nice.
So what is the best piece of advice then you've ever received?
I think as planners, so part of our training is to make sure you're engaging what we call stakeholders, so who's interested in what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I think, so there's a lot of training around that when we go to school, and I think that is a piece that I bring to the job and all the planners do that's really important, because like we were talking about before, trying to understand where somebody's coming from, or having empathy, or just trying to get to the yes on a project. I think trying to understand what somebody's trying to say to you, or
right.
Active listening, I guess.
Yeah. So kind of building on that idea then, so how do you approach decision making with your roles? So obviously you have to make sure, you have to find that compromise, but how do you in your mind get to that point where it's a good compromise for both sides of the party, or for the community, or anyone really?
So it depends on what the decision is, but I usually try to take in as much information as I can and talk to people maybe that are outside of my usual circle. So, and get some different perspectives and try to synthesize that down and take all of that information very seriously.
Right.
And then have conversations. And so that's my ultimate decision making happens after all of that happens. So talking to people, trying to get information, and then trying to make the best decision based on that.
Do you find that it's easier to make community-based decisions being a resident, as opposed to like working from outside the city and kind of being like, it's not necessarily the city I live in, but...
No, I don't think it's necessarily that as much as how long I've been here. So
also fair.
Yeah, I've been here a long time, and just like we've got other planners that don't live in the city but have been in with the city for quite a while, and you just get to know the community and value the community and understand it.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the better things that I could say about the city, is that everyone, regardless if they live here or not, really love and care about the city. I mean, it's... You don't work for a city if you don't care for the city. Yeah. So people have to, you have to appreciate it for its, values that it has, be it, natural, physical, or otherwise. So I think there's I don't think there's a single person I could think of that like, no, they don't really like the city, but they work here because, the pay's good or something like that.
Yeah, especially in this climate with employees, everybody that's here is choosing public service. It's a choice. And so because we could all easily be in the private sector, but... So it's definitely a public service choice.
Definitely.
All right. The last section I have, we have some rapid fire questions. These are the more fun ones.
Fun for you or fun for me?
No, I don't think they're too difficult. So you can explain these if you feel like you need to defend your point on them at all. But don't worry, it's not going to be anything too crazy. All right. So early bird or night owl?
Probably early bird.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Favorite season of the year?
Summer.
Half step back. What's your go-to coffee? Is it just coffee black, or do you get a specialty coffee?
Coffee with real cream.
Okay.
That's
nice
I
and
like
simple.
tea too, but I start my day with coffee, so I have to say coffee.
Makes sense.
What's your go-to comfort food?
Probably macaroni and cheese.
Good choice.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Yay.
Favorite holiday?
Halloween.
Sweet or savory?
Tough. Both. I love food. I don't know.
That's good. That's fine. Do you have a favorite sport to watch or play?
I like to play tennis, and I like to watch basketball.
Now, with tennis, there's the ever so popular cousin of pickleball. Have you played it? Do you enjoy it if you have it?
I've never played pickleball. We did buy pickleball rackets, but we haven't actually played it.
Favorite ice cream flavor?
Coffee.
Really?
Do you think you're more of an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert.
Favorite type of music?
Right now, I tend to change, but right now I'd say jazz.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite jazz musician that you favor?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm just...
Do you have a favorite style? Where is it the more, is syncopated the right word, where it's actually like it sounds more symphonic?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or versus
like
discordant.
more big band, more swing, more bebop. Or as a jazz musician.
Yeah, I know. I asked the wrong
Oh,
person.
gosh, no, we're gonna do-
I asked the wrong person.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, okay. That's okay. Favorite color?
Red.
Any variety, Fred?
I'd say any variety, not a specific tone.
And then, do you prefer more chocolate or fruity types of candy?
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
If you could go back in time and tell your younger self some words of advice or encouragement, what would you say?
I think I would say to savor and appreciate each experience that you're having. I think sometimes I was so focused on where I was going in the future, I wasn't kind of present in the moment. And that's probably one of the things that I wish I would have done a little differently.
Yeah, that's a common one I think we've kind of heard. Is that I think, especially with the advancement of technology, so many people are living in the moment, but not quite there. It's like, oh, I'm going to take the pictures so I can put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram, put it wherever, but they're not truly living that moment. They're
living through
the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It takes more effort now to really be present.
It's a lot of, you got to disconnect, put the phone away, take your picture, but then put the phone away and live in the moment. I mean,
and not be tempted to pick it back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think actually one of the funniest ones, not necessarily funny, but better ideas I've seen is if you're out with a group of friends, stack your phones on top of each other on the table, and whoever's the first person to pick it up, they pay the bill for everyone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
So puts a little bit more heavier a burden on everyone to, unless an emergency comes up and, if your phone rings, fine, you can pick it up that way, but you're not responding back and forth to someone. You're just living in the moment with those people.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say or add?
No, thank you for having me and being interested in planning.
And that's a wrap for another episode of Talkin' Waukesha. We hope you enjoyed diving into the heart of our city with us.
If you have a story to share or just want to say hello, reach out to us on social media at City of Waukesha on Facebook. We love hearing from our listeners.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review if you enjoyed the conversation. It really helps us spread the word.
As always, thanks for tuning in to Talkin' Waukesha, where every conversation springs to life.